Song Revolution with John Chisum on the NRT Podcast Network.
Hey, Brian, good to be here at Gray Box Studio in Green Hills.
Yeah.
Today I've got a little bit of cold, so if my voice sounds a little freaky, that's what's going on.
Yeah, no worries. I'm excited to be here and talking to you about your story. Today you're going to get interviewed, which is not normal.
Kind of flipping the script on me.
Flipping the script, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've heard your story a bunch of times. We've known each other for a lot of years, so I'm excited to just unpack it and hear more about how we even got here to today, sitting in Gray Box.
Yeah,
yes.
You know, it's surprising. One of my favorite scriptures, anybody that hangs around me knows, is Ephesians 3:18, and I think it's 18, 19, and 20, where Paul said that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond all that we can ask or even imagine. And there are some other great translations that, expound upon that verse. But, for me to be at this season of my life and look back and realize that God was preparing me over many decades for Nashville Christian songwriters is just astounding and amazing. And I look back and I see that the greatest things of my life, I was not smart enough to ask God for. And so when I think about praying even now and asking God for something I want, it's really hard because I see that He always knew what was best and always knew what was better and would bring greater blessing and anointing and results than I could have imagined. So a lot of my prayer these days is just whatever. God, thank you, whatever, or whatever, thank you. And so the story, what I'd like to do is maybe not just do the sound bites, but maybe unpack a little bit of it.
Yeah, I'd love to go deep, go back to the beginning, because we talk a lot about the sound bites. You've been in this thing for a long time, decades of writing music and being in the industry, but let's go back to the beginning. John Chisum, the inception of John Chisum.
Well, yeah. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and I did not grow up in a Christian home, but I grew up in a very musical home. And so we didn't really talk about Jesus or God, and we didn't go to church. And I loved my parents, may they rest in peace. But, my dad was a journalist and he was an English professor. And so I grew up around the love of words and reading. Wasn't a great reader as a kid. I'm a great reader now, but he instilled in me a love for words. And my mom and dad were bluegrass musicians. And so Dad played anything with strings on it. He played really super well for an amateur musician. And he played acoustic guitar, claw hammer, banjo. He played fiddle, mandolin. A bouzouki is a big mandolin. Okay. And he had all those instruments. And I grew up listening to everything from Mahler to Flatt and Scruggs. And so I grew up in a very eclectic musical background. And my mom played, these are self-taught people, and my mom played keys and harmonica.
Wow.
And she had a whole collection of harps, and she could just flat wail. And I remember being at a community center in Memphis years ago and watching them, and I got tears listening to my mom just wail on, the green, green grass of home or some bluegrass song, So that was my heritage. But the darker side of my childhood was that I had become addicted to drugs and alcohol and was pretty messed up as a kid. And I remember a number of years back, now our daughter's now 30, but when she was in high school, she started asking me about my childhood, and I started describing it, and she looked at me with these big eyes, and she said, "Oh my God, Daddy, you were an emo goth." So I really was. I mean, it was kind of a depressive childhood, and there was addiction going on, and just things that were really pretty dark and pretty awful. And so when I came to Christ at 18, it was a real gutter to glory kind of salvation experience for me, because I had never totally felt that kind of love. I know my parents loved me and my siblings and all that, but I didn't have that inner experience of being loved by God and had heard little snippets, but I didn't know the gospel, and I didn't know the experience of being loved by God. And that's what happened. And because I'd never really tried to write songs prior to this, but the first thing I wanted to do when I experienced, I mean, it was a dramatic experience.
Yeah, what was that experience? Was it in church?
Oh, gosh. No, actually it wasn't. It was a kid named David that I used to get high with all the time. And it turned, I'm being very transparent.
Yeah.
Suddenly, aren't I? Don't judge me, you guys. It's a long time ago. No sin in my life now. So that's the way Christian life is. It's like you can talk about sin in the past.
Yeah, you got to give a disclaimer.
Yeah. I'm clean now, but there was a kid named David that I used to get high with, and we were in high school together. And turns out he was just a backslidden Baptist boy. And he got his life right with Jesus and got the youth group praying for his lost friend, John Chisum. And that's why I'm here. They prayed for me. And so I was invited by David because I love to sing. And I was actually singing a little quartet at his church every now and then, but mostly school choir and that type thing. But he asked me to go on a youth trip from Memphis to another city, and I didn't know what I was getting into.
You had never been in church?
I didn't know what it was. I'd never been on a church bus before. I'd never really been in Sunday school or anything like that. And went on this trip, and the very first day, I would have called her elderly then. She's probably in her 40s or 50s. She sat me down and she said, You're just going down for the third time. I can tell you need Jesus. And she led me into this, just accepting Christ. And
just right there.
And I knew that my current lifestyle, I was depressed, I was addicted, I was messed up. And it was like this it was a surrender. And I know we use that word a lot, but it was a deep, deep surrender of my soul to Christ. And I felt it. It was like such trite phrases like darkness to light. It doesn't even adequately sum it up. But it was a literal surrender to Christ in which I just felt flooded with the knowledge of his presence, with a sense of love like I've never felt before. And it was astounding. And it's why I'm still here.
Wow.
All these years later, I'm still living on that moment. I mean, I've grown in my faith. I've grown in my knowledge of the Bible, of course. I have a master's in worship studies. So, I've had the lifetime now, 50 some odd years of growing in Christ, but it's still based on that.
Wow.
That's what it's based on. That every song I ever have written or will ever write, that's the bottom line. That's the epicenter. That's just the feeling out of it, right?
Yeah, your whole journey with Christ.
So that's how that happened.
Wow. Do you remember her name?
Oh, yeah. Her name was Lynn, and she became my spiritual mother.
Wow.
And spent the next couple of years just really being discipled by her. And so she deserves a lot of credit for my life and ministry.
It's so cool.
I know.
Man, it's crazy, those people in your life that you have such a radical experience with, and it's easy to go later on in life and forget those moments and constantly, now I feel like you're doing that for so many people. You're now a spiritual father of sorts to, a lot of songwriters and a lot of people that are trying to pursue what you've pursued with your life. So it's cool that it stems from that moment. So you're 18, you get saved. What happens next?
Well, the first thing I wanted to do was write a song, which is crazy. I'd never really tried to write a lot of songs. I might have written one or two, but suddenly I wanted so badly to write about Jesus and what I felt. And so I started trying, and I played guitar a little bit, and over the next couple of years, really developed a regional ministry around Memphis, singing in different Baptist churches, and would sing at, I had a friend that I would sing with, and we would sing at youth banquets or Valentine banquets or Christmas stuff, whatever.
Anywhere there's a microphone.
anywhere where they let us, right? So did that and just started learning a little more. I was musical and had actually been in a lot of choir and voice lessons early on, but started learning more about constructing songs. And it was still embryonic. It still wasn't a whole lot, but I was writing my little songs. And I sent one. I decided I wanted to send one up here to Nashville. And I will not say who rejected me, but
Did you know that was the thing? Like, were you around people who were writing songs?
No, not at all.
So you just had this idea that Nashville was a place where you could be heard.
Exactly.
Okay.
And my dad had this vast record collection, and so I would read the liner notes, and I loved everything, Jethro Tull, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the David Bowie, all those people. But I also liked people like Joni Mitchell and Judy Collins and some of the folk people and some of the people around Nashville. So I would read about it. But by then, Christian music was beginning to be made, and there were different people that were they're writing the early youth musicals and things like that. But there was a singer who came to my church. I don't want to say it was because I don't want to besmirch her.
Sure.
But so she sang Sunday morning at my church, and I asked her if she would listen to a song, and she told me she would meet with me at 4:00 that afternoon. She didn't show, and I was so disappointed.
Oh, wow.
My hopes were so huge, right?
Yeah.
And I was just devastated, but I decided I'm going to send her and her publishing company that song. And so, 6 weeks later, I get a rejection letter, and I just swore I'd never do that again. Like, I'm not going to do it, And I burned all her records and just... No, I didn't. She was great.
On her picture.
She was great. But, ironically, okay, fast forward now, into my career now, what we do at Nashville Christian Songwriters, every time someone submits a song, like to our One Song Challenge or that I look at the song and I'm like, they might feel like I felt when I got rejected. I didn't get rejected by her, but when she didn't show, and I felt, you know what I mean? It's like...
It's devastating.
It is devastating. And we put so much of our heart, so much of our desire and dreams for being used by God are in these little songs. And so I try to treat every writer we work with and every song like I felt back then.
Yeah. Give it a fair chance, right? Listen to it and hear what they're trying to communicate.
And just try not to stomp all over their hearts,
Yeah.
So...
Man. So you didn't take no for an answer in some ways. You kept going, kept pushing through. What happened next after you got that letter?
Actually, I gave up.
Did you give up?
Actually, I gave up.
So rewind.
Rewind, man. I know, I really did. I'm like, okay, screw that. Just like, I'm not made for that rejection, right?
Yeah.
I'm too sensitive. So I didn't try. And it was a number of years later, that actually probably 6-7 years later, I stayed in ministry and was trying to develop my ministry and
leading worship,
still writing,
music, and
yeah, we didn't call it worship back then.
Sure.
It was song leading.
The song leader.
I'm so old, but anyway, so I kept doing that and developed a little itinerant ministry. There's a lot of granular backstory I'm not going to go into.
Sure.
We'll kind of stay at the top level here, but wound up traveling for a season, came through Nashville to have a concert, and the pastor said he was praying for a new song leader, and he wanted me to be it. So we had some more dates to finish, so we finished that, my wife and I, and we came here to take the job, and he decided he couldn't hire us.
Wow.
And we had $40 and no place to live. I mean, we were just living hand to mouth in that season.
Yeah.
$40, no place to live. My wife, through her tears, just said, can't we stay here and be normal people and live normal lives?
Yeah.
And so she wound up with a little graphics job, making $100 a week. And I got a paper route, making $60 a week.
Wow.
And we were couch surfing before that was a term.
Yeah.
And hanging out, trying to just figure out our head from a hole in the ground.
Yeah.
And this would have been November of '83. It was cold and snowy and didn't know anybody. And I remember driving up and down Music Row praying to God to open up the music business for me. And it was probably 3 months later, through someone I met here, I was introduced to Bill Gaither and Gary McSpadden and some other people. And they listened to some of those little songs that have never seen the light of day now. And they signed me to a publishing contract.
Wow.
It's laughable now. I mean, you'd never get that now, right?
Yeah.
This is 84. And in my first year, as I was co-writing with people, Bill and Gloria Gaither and Gary McSpadden would look at my songs and they would say things like, yeah, this is nice. We can see you love Jesus, but who's going to care about this in 100 years, you know? And they mentored me and coached me. And I wound up getting 20 songs recorded in my first year as a writer. And
with other artists record, cutting those songs.
Yeah, those were the years of Sandy Patty and Larnell Harris and Steve Green.
Wow.
And I had the opening song on Steve Green's first big record that shipped at 100,000 units. And it was a big deal, you know, back then. And I was very aggressive. And I would meet with anybody who would listen to my songs. I would just go at it. You know, if you were an artist or a record producer or record company, you know, A&R guy, if you were the secretary, I would meet with you and try to pitch our songs.
Yeah.
So the Gaithers and the people that ran their publishing company saw how aggressive I was, and so they hired me to be a publisher.
Wow.
I didn't know what a publisher was.
Yeah.
It was just ridiculous. There was one year, I was so aggressive that one year at Christmas, I dressed up in an entire Rudolph with a red nose costume. Yeah. And I went up and down Music Row handing out candy to the secretaries. And you know why I did that?
Why?
Because the secretaries would let me in to see the record company.
Exactly. The gatekeepers.
Right? They're the gatekeepers.
Man.
So guess whose calls got in the rest of the next year, right?
Oh.
Rudolph's got it every time.
That's so crazy. I feel like that's something to talk about because so many people, I think even in today's times with the internet and with you can send an email in a matter of seconds, right? Or a text. There was so much that went into the foundation of your career that was hustle, you know, figuring out new ways to do things, connecting with people, not taking no for an answer, like continuing to push through. Do you feel like in today's world, it's easier to just send an email and hope that somebody's going to hear you or think about you rather than like actually hitting the ground and getting your songs out there? Does that make sense?
I think that's a great point. And I think that the missing element in so many people's lives right now is authenticity and humanity. And we write our songs trying to get on CCLI instead of writing our songs truly for Jane sitting out there who's a single mom with 3 little kids and she can't quite pay her bills, or, you know, for Bill who's, you know, 71 and his wife just died. And, you know, we're writing so often out of wrong motivations, and we've lost some of that humanity. And that's a little maybe off topic of your question, but I think that we've become digitized people, and we do have just instantaneous ways to you know, I drop an email or drop a text instead of write a thank you note and be real and authentic with people.
Right.
Yeah, man, I think that's
post on Instagram or, you know, some social media platform and hope that it goes viral or takes off, versus like there are actual, like, you were boots on the ground making it happen. Not saying that someone needs to dress up like Rudolph and go to Music Row today.
I dare.
They might get arrested.
I dare. Yeah.
But that same work ethic, that same, you know, mindset of this is not a I'm going to write a bunch of songs, throw them out to the world, and one day become famous. Like that's not, obviously the goal is not fame, but there's an actual work ethic to this that I think is what I'm getting at. Is like, I think people are missing that element of like, this is a long game. Like this is you've been in this for decades now. Like, so, okay, so pick up, you were at the Gaithers, you took over publishing.
Yeah, and that's when I just started to learn.
Yeah, and you were like in the deep end figuring it out. What was that?
Yeah, and you know what? Let me really make a point, kind of right at this moment, because I got signed to that contract, but I did not know how to write well. I had this incredibly huge desire to write, and I had all the inspiration in the world, and I had, all the goosebumps and the feelings about Jesus and, all that.
Yep.
But I didn't really know the craft of songwriting. And that's what these dear people poured into me. And I have to mention co-writers that I wrote with. Co-writing was huge even way back then, 40 years ago. And the people that I co-wrote with taught me so much. They must have been frustrated at times with me because I didn't know what they knew.
Yeah.
And I learned, and I was so hungry. I just soaked it in and let them mentor me as well. And by getting all those songs placed in my aggressive relationship building, networking, I was just, it wasn't like I set out with a plan.
Sure.
That's why I say Ephesians 3:18. Man, put that on my tombstone. It's like I was just doing what I felt I wanted so badly to do. I didn't have this master plan of attacking people with my songs. I was just so in love with Jesus and in love with these songs.
Yeah.
So
would you say now that looking back, that's a desire that he actually placed in your heart? Like that you were so motivated or felt like you didn't have a plan, but would you say that that's actually like, you feel like that was a calling on your life?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was made for this. So I would I would do anything to meet with people. And after that first year, they wanted to hire me as a publisher. And I didn't know what that was. But then I started learning more and more and more. I went from throwing papers at 3 a.m. to working at a publishing company and learning how to coach songwriters. And they would bring writers in, and I was responsible for managing their catalogs. And so I would listen to their songs. Everybody was listening to everybody's songs, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a great synergy there. And I started learning how to bring out of writers their best work. I started understanding what made them tick and what they were stumbling over. And as I was being mentored and growing, I could then look at other people's work and suggest what they could do to make it better. And so I started getting this reputation as kind of a song guy and being able to understand what can make a song better, but also what an audience would appreciate, right? Because that's this tension that I've always lived in as a publisher and as a songwriter is, okay, I have this idea or you have this idea for a song, but how's that going to be received, right? Is that hook, is that title going to really be strong enough to live out in a greater way? And the Gaithers taught me that. And Bill and Gloria, but they would always, ask me, they would challenge me, like, does this title really convey what you think? And is it big enough to hang a whole 3.5 minute experience on? And that just really formed the foundation of everything I even teach today.
Wow.
So you could throw out some hooks and I could tell you the 1 out of 25 that I think could probably connect with an audience. And so I learned to write and to coach with the audience singing in my ears. Like, how would it really be received? What would they feel? What kind of atmosphere would that song bring them into? Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that's a massive missing piece for a lot of people, because they're so consumed in their songs that they're writing, whether it's a personal song or, whatever the goal is of that song. But you're missing, if you're not thinking from the audience perspective, you're missing more than 50% of the songwriting.
Oh, yeah.
So that's
you're
cool
missing it all, really.
Yeah. I mean, you were taught that early on, and now you're teaching that to people, and I think that's an incredible gift. Even what I've experienced you coaching, that's a gift that you have to really see both sides and understand, hey, this is a good idea, this is a bad idea, and then you explain, why it's a bad idea is because it's not going to connect with your audience.
Right.
So wow, that's super cool.
So it's flipping the script, really.
Yeah.
And I have personally conducted over 2,600 enrollment calls to our coaching, right? Yeah. We have these great coaching offers, and I've spoken personally with over 2,600 aspiring Christian songwriters, and they all say without a doubt, I just want to use my gifts for God. I just want to get my songs out there. And it's like, well, yeah, that's awesome, but that's all about you. It's all about their gifts and their talents and their abilities. And it's like, it's so back to the question earlier, right? The motivation for this thing.
Yeah.
It all really comes back to them, at least at the beginning. And it did for me too. And at some point, though, you have to grow in your craft to the point where the script flips to where it's not about, yeah, sure, you're using your gifts and talents for God. That's great. And sure, you're glorifying Jesus. That's great. That's wonderful. That's just kind of like bottom shelf stuff, right?
Yeah.
As you grow in your craft, you learn to think about their needs, and it becomes more of a true ministry, I believe.
Sure.
Yeah. At least that's the pure version. That's the the version I love about that is let's serve people with our writing, and we benefit, and we love doing it because it's fun and all that, but it's really about those songs that can have a long, long shelf life.
Yep. Yes. Wow. And you have to learn the fundamentals and the basics. Like you said, there's a period where it is about you because you're learning how to do it. And then when that flips, you can understand how a song can impact someone.
Exactly.
And then you can start to feel that and understand that and learn that. Like, now I can judge my own ideas better, or I can, in a co-writing session, I can help navigate or, decide what's going to actually connect with people.
Exactly.
Man, so let's, jump into publishing. You did that for how long with the Gaithers?
Since before Dirt, forever. I was with the Gaithers for 7 years total.
Yeah.
And I grew up to become vice president of publishing for Star Song Media, which was a Gaither-owned company.
Okay.
And I managed about 12 songwriters for them over that period, and I was continuing to write and had some significant songs recorded, like Steve Green's For God and God Alone album, that opening song. I had songs recorded. A Mighty Fortress is a huge one for Larnell. You might have grown up on that in the AG church.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. A Mighty Fortress.
A mighty fortress is our God.
It's a take on the hymn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the late Bill George wrote the melody, and it was my first big song. And
wow.
One of my biggest songs ever is a Southern gospel song called Canny Cuddy Woody.
I have heard.
You grew up on that one, didn't you?
Oh yeah, we've had quartets coming through all the time.
It's like gets the quartet song.
Canny Cuddy Woody, he did.
Canny Cuddy Woody, yes, he Canny Cuddy Woody, and he did.
That's so great. We were sitting at lunch one day, and you were talking to someone else, and I think you mentioned that song, and I did a double take. I was like, wait, what? Like, we grew up,
I'm Southern gospel royalty just because of that song, but
that's fun.
Everybody's sung. The cathedrals made it famous.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but everybody's sung it, and man, it was just a silly little thing that happened,
Yeah.
And then a couple of other things. There was a group called First Call back in the day, and had a big hit with those guys, Truth, and some others kind of back in that day. But I wound up going to Integrity Music for a number of years and wound up managing 18 full-time songwriters and working on over 200 pieces of product just for Integrity.
Wow.
Published thousands of songs, and I wound up being over the entire song development publishing department and the whole copyright area. So it's just been amazing. I had 20 employees, 18 songwriters, and then all of the product. And so,
wow,
man, they didn't pay me enough.
That's a lot.
I needed a raise.
Just having 18 songwriters in a room.
Oh, I think it's great.
Personalities and quirks. And
oh my gosh, it was great. People like Linda Shazo, who wrote, Lord, you are more precious than silver.
Oh,
yeah. or Nancy Gordon and Jamie Harville, who wrote Jesus, You're My Firm Foundation, which was a big hit for me, actually. That was my first big album in 94 with Integrity's Hosanna music, and it really is what opened up a global ministry for me. It's that song and that album, Firm Foundation, is so interwoven into the fabric of worship in Africa.
Wow.
Especially places like Nigeria and Ghana and other places. I'm actually the David Hasselhoff of worship in Nigeria.
That's a great mental picture. The David Hasselhoff of worship in Nigeria.
So
I'm gonna write that one.
I'm sorry, David.
Yeah.
I don't have the hairy chest, but yeah, I mean, it's like I actually am kind of famous in Nigeria for that record and for that song, and everywhere. I've been in Nigeria 5 times, and it's like, wow. I mean, it's just amazing what one song can be in a whole, nation like that. It's insane,
Wow. That's something I'm constantly amazed by in the music industry, is like, it takes you places you would never go otherwise. Like a one song like that can take, like you said.
That's why we do our one song challenge. It's like, Yeah.
One song can change everything. It's wild.
It really can. And because I believe from the Gaither's influence, really mentoring me to strive to write songs that can outlive me. I believe I have 2 or 3 out of the 400 or so I've had recorded in my career. I believe I got 2 or 3 that are going to outlive me. And I have one song called "Oh Mighty Cross" that I co-wrote with my dear friend David Baroni, and he deserves so much credit for this song, but it's in a couple of hymnals and we're not even dead yet. So it's edified. And a song called "Christ Above Me," which was written with my dear friend George Searcy. And it's really a very popular kind of a communion song. And then also with George, we wrote a song called "Our Heart," which since 1994 has been one of the most popular mission songs. So we have a song about the cross, we have a song about the presence of Christ, and a song about missions or evangelism. So, when I think about the big topics, in our faith and what we write about, it's just kind of interesting. So I think 3 or 4, there might be one more, but, I think a lot of what I want to see happen with the clients we work with at Nashville Christian Songwriters, and the reason we do the kind of programs and coaching that we do, is to help anyone who feels this deep calling to level up to writing songs that can outlive them, to have some standards. You think about Fanny Crosby and "This Is My Story, This Is My Song," and so many others. She wrote over 9,000 hymns, right? She didn't write the music, but she wrote all these lyrics, right?
Yeah.
To think of the body of work that's in a Fanny Crosby or some of these other great hymn writers, Thomas Chisum, not spelled like mine, but he wrote "Great Is Thy Faithfulness." It's like to think of the legacy, the value of writing a song that can outlive you and bring the gospel and bring a sense of worship and bring, biblical truths to people long after you're gone. What a gift to the world. And so to feel like I'm in that line where at least one song maybe, has had the chance to outlive me, that's powerful. So that's the kind of thing I try to pass on in all of our coaching, is like, you can do this too. If you're called to this, you have to become prolific. You can't write 1 or 2 or 3 songs a year and feel like I've written this, I've wrote this, so I've written this, so you've got to like it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the great fallacies of Christian songwriters, is they feel that because they love Jesus, people ought to love their songs. And guess what? It doesn't work that way. So I'm very, very grateful that Bill and Gloria and Gary and other people, that they took the time and they loved God and me enough to pour that into me. And so that's what we try to pass on.
It's so good. I was even thinking, when you're talking about the hymnals, the people that have been around you through this journey have really helped shape that legacy, you know? And even thinking, you know, it makes me thankful for people who preserve great songs and put them in hymnals, create units where they can actually stand the test of time and be around. And I remember growing up singing songs out of hymnals and, you know, turn to page 185. Yeah. You know, it's like the hymn moment in the song set or whatever. But I'm thankful for that because that legacy lives on. You know, hymnals are all around the world. But anyways, the thought of people coming around you to help, you know, the team that supported your songwriting, I think is very important. Because if you're writing one or two songs and hoping that that's going to carry you throughout your career, good luck. That's not really the way it works, right? You got to have a team of people around you, and what you've created. We could maybe go into this to kind of wrap it up, is talking about coming from publishing and your background into what you're doing now with Nashville Christian Songwriters. You're essentially creating that team that didn't exist before for writers to come in and be heard and have support and know what the steps are to even getting their songs out there and creating the legacy you're talking about. So maybe talk about that a little bit, what you're doing now with NCS. And
well, when I started Nashville Christian Songwriters 8 years ago, it really was out of a real desire to pass on what I've learned. You know, I'm coming to that point where I can either accept aging and mortality or not. It's like, okay, we can just, you know, be young forever, but I still feel 25 inside. But I started looking back, and actually I was getting coaching for my career because I found myself in between church ministry that I had been in for a long time and not knowing what was next. I was in this kind of liminal space where, you know, I'm stepping over a threshold, but I don't know what's on the other side of that threshold. I knew that one season had come to an end, but I didn't really totally know what the next season was. So I was getting some coaching. Just, you know, I believe in coaching. I have a coach now. I keep a coach, or maybe several of them. And I are one, but I also, you know, have one or more. And the guy I was talking with, wonderful man here in Nashville, he's like, you were being so selfish to not pass on what you know about songwriting and publishing, because the music business had changed. It just didn't seem like the thing that, you know, I had been in years ago. And he just really, really kind of kicked my butt about passing on what I knew.
Yeah.
And honestly, Brian, I didn't know what I knew. I did not know what I knew. And he was recognizing it because I would tell him everything I'd done and been part of, and I didn't know what I knew. And I was unconsciously competent. And he said, you have got to share this. And so I started looking for a way to do that. I came across the URL, NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com. Could not believe it was available for $13.99. And so I started just trying to gather what I knew and find a way to share it. And so it started off just teaching songwriting only. And now 8 years later, at this point, we're 8 full years into this thing, we have, by momentum and just the sheer wave of what's going on, we've had to become a full-on music company, you know, where we actually offer everything from free resources, lots of podcasts like this one, of course, and we have 3 different coaching offers at this point, but we also have a production company. We're a publisher now, and we are starting our own collective to where we're sharing the music that we're creating. So we've actually been kind of, I don't say shoved by God, but kind of pushed into this thing where we're rising. God is allowing us to rise to meet the need of aspiring Christian songwriters and artists. And it wasn't because, well, I'm going to be a record company and we're going to do this and have this big business plan. It hasn't felt like that. It's been more of a wave of God's spirit momentum, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's become the full picture rather than just one slice of it. Everything begins with the song. If you don't have a song worth copywriting, don't go copyright it. If it's not something that's worth taking out there, we're floating in a sea of mediocrity, because Spotify, this is probably an old stat now, but the last time I checked, they were releasing 60,000 songs a day. And just it's horrible. It's really kind of sad.
Yeah.
It's a sad byproduct of tech right now, but I hope that we can help elevate the quality of Christian music again. And I don't poo-poo Christian music, but at least everything all the independent and all the aspiring folks are out there doing is like, let's raise the bar, let's raise the level of quality here again to where you can write a song that could outlive you. So, I don't think I answered your question, did I?
That was great. I don't remember. I don't remember what my question was.
I think I just answered the question I wanted to answer. I was paying attention to you. But,
that's great.
No, but it is amazing to look back on 8 years, and it's amazing to look back on 40 years and even beyond that, to see that each decade built on the other, traveling all over the world, many, many parts, working in all kinds of churches, every stripe you can imagine, and now being able to work with all kinds of songwriters. Red and yellow, black and white.
Yeah.
They're precious.
And the people that have come around in CS have really brought it to life too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You stepped out to offer what you know, and then it's grown into a community of people that are just awesome. Like some of the calls we get to be on and like the workshops and things like that. Just seeing these people who, because you stepped out, you've given them the opportunity to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit and be like, hey, this is how it works in Nashville. This is my experience, but also this is how it's working in 2023 or the current era. But I've seen that, and I've seen people's response to that, and it's always just overwhelming that they would have the opportunity for someone who cares to hear their song and to validate, to teach and to train and to help encourage. We have some brilliant songwriters that come through, and we'll hear a song, even you and I will hear a song and be like, whoa, this is awesome. Like
absolutely.
And we hear someone, we're like, whoa, this is not awesome. This needs some help. We can, encourage and train. And so I've loved watching just we've known each other for 7 years, and 7 years. Yeah. I went on 8. So it's just been cool to see this thing grow, and now to the point where you are a full service music company, kind of the same, as you walked down Music Row 40 years ago, praying in those moments. It's like, that's coming full circle now.
Amazing.
To see this come to life. So yeah, I'm just thankful to be a part, thankful to be around. I've learned so much from you, encouraged by what you're doing and your story. And maybe we'll just wrap up by sharing a few, unless you have any words of wisdom that you want to jump into, but sharing a few things that NCS does to help songwriters. What are the offerings? What are the programs? What are we working on these days?
Well, our mission statement is to empower Christian songwriters worldwide. And over these 8 years, with 2 video courses that we offer through all the podcasts, at this point of this recording, we're at almost 180 episodes, which is crazy. 175,000 downloads last I checked, and I don't think that counts all the people that watch that don't download. So who knows, the power of this whole thing. We've had what we call the NCS Pro Song Mastery Program for 7 full years now. The first year I didn't know my head from home ground, so I was just trying to figure it out. But that second year, we started offering an 8-week online coaching experience that at this point over 350-ish people have gone through. And it is a baptism and immersion in the craft of songwriting. And anybody listening to this, if you're called, if you know, or you even whatever you can call a calling, you've got all the inspiration you need. You've got all the Jesus you're going to get, right? But what you don't have is the craft. And so that's what we bring to that, And so that's that 8-week online coaching. We do that in group. And then we also do one-on-one coaching. That's that same program, an 8-week, but it's just one-on-one. We've just recently launched an artist development program, which is very, very exciting. And that's starting to pick up. And that program is really for people who really want to be a traveling, touring, making records, go at it. And no matter what genre. We're working right now with a bluegrass artist, which is exciting. We're working with a CCM artist. We're working with a group of young Presbyterian interns who are creating a whole new stream of worship music that's biblically rich and solid and yet contemporary in music. And so that artist development program is really intended to give an aspiring independent artist everything they need to launch their career, their ministry. And, we're living in a funny day, and because of technology, you don't need a record company any longer. You can build your audience, you can build your platform, you can really have everything you need. So what we're doing with the NCS Artist Development Program is we're your record label in a box. And so we bring the A&R function, we bring the songwriting function, the production, we bring the social media development, we bring everything that a record label would bring. We coach you through a 90-day program where you get all of that in place and you know what you're doing. So it's really exciting.
So exciting.
Yeah. And then the last piece of that we're in the process of developing right now, which we're calling the NCS Writers Collective, because we have so many people and so many amazing songs now that we're becoming an outlet, a resource for promoting, marketing those songs. So it's feasible that you could start with NCS with our podcast and go all the way through to our Writers Collective.
Right.
Your whole career, your whole ministry. Right. I don't think I've ever said it like that, but it is feasible that you could start here and wind up with the ministry that you dream of having. That's amazing. That's kind of blowing me away. Had a pause for a moment. I'm getting high on that.
Yeah. That's not with David.
No, with David. No, that's usually, that guy got a little rush when I said that.
No, I love that. I love that whether you're a songwriter who wants to stay a songwriter and just be behind the scenes and, be great at your craft, but not really ever hit the stage. There's a place for people like that. But there's also this path where if you're writing songs and you want to be the one that takes them to the world, there's a place for that. And there's a team that could come around you and support you, and if you're just getting started and you have no idea how to do this thing, but you have a desire, you have that call that you felt at 18 to do it, there are free resources and tons of, you have interviews with anyone that you can think of in the Christian music world over those 180 episodes that you mentioned. So this is awesome, man. Thank you for sharing and going way back to the early days all the way up until now.
Thanks, Brian. Glad to have you on the team, man.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for joining us on the show today. I hope that you'll jump over to NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com and check out all the resources there to encourage you in your own songwriting. And if you like what we're doing, why not share this episode out on your socials? You can find the link in the show notes. We'll see you next time.